who is Clausewitz and what the fuck is his problem? Now, if you're me, you've never heard of Clausewitz. I didn't even know the guy existed until I picked up How Not to Be Wrong by, Jordan Ellenberg. Speaking of which, considering how often I mention your books, sir, you better show up on my channel someday. Just saying. So I saw his name and I was like, okay, who the hell is this guy? And what's his deal? Turns out Clausewitz was a Prussian general, early 1800s, who wrote on war. Happened to rival my, postbox today, courtesy of Amazon. So I've just started reading it. And from what I understand, it was a classic written to discuss foundational military theory, stuff like that. I'm talking art of war, that kind of nonsensical stuff. But you might be wondering, what's the significance mathematically? To be honest, I wasn't too clued up either, so I think I'd read more into it. So he had a pretty decorated military career and then drifted into brutal fog and the politics associated with warfare and whatnot. I messed it up. Retake. He had a decorated military career and then drifted into the brutal fog that is politics, and from that chaotic mess he tried to understand what war really was. Not just how it looked on the battlefield, but what it meant behind the scenes. He argued that war isn't just violence, but it's politics, emotions, unpredictability, playing out through military means. He gave us this big idea. War really is a continuation of politics by other means, which sounds poetic, but it's kind of terrifying. Clausewitz dissected war like a psychoanalyst. He pulled it apart into pieces, getting some insights about political intentions, emotional volatility, and sheer randomness of what actually happens at the ground. I couldn't help but try and magnify it, given that I'm exploring that whole field these days. Like this. So essentially, I just turned it into a function. But in essence, why is it relevant here? Well, looking at that, and also looking at the channel, it's really just about systems thinking. It's modeling chaos. It's recognizing that you're never dealing with perfect information or perfect systems. It kind of fits in with what we talked about the survivor's bias in the previous episodes that I was talking about. If you haven't checked those out, you might find it very interesting. His obsession with friction and the fog of war is just something that you would think of as early probabilistic modeling. It's about strategy when the inputs are dirty and the outputs are uncertain. And that, my friends, is the same thing we try to do with algebra and statistics and probability. So I went down this rabbit hole thinking, maybe there's a neat little answer to what Clausewitz was all about. Turns out it wasn't. But that's kind of the point. He's not giving you really any answers. I don't think that's the idea, but he's giving you a framework to ask better questions, which might be the real contribution he made. Because the same way we fall for survivorship bias or make the mistake of using the visible as the basis for the full picture, we have the same phenomenon expressing itself when it comes to conflict, politics, economics, and even ourselves. So in closing, what was his problem? Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Maybe he just saw the world in a very interesting way. Dealing with perspectives here, the basic mess of assumptions and unseen pressures that give us some very muddy perspective on things, but it's all kind of foggy. But hey, this is a mass channel. No conspiracies here, right? See, if you're me, you've never heard of Clausewitz. I didn't even know the guy existed until I picked up a copy of How Not to Be Wrong by Jordan Ellenberg. Also, quick side note, considering how often I'm mentioning your book, Jordan, I'm show up on my podcast someday. I'm watching it. Anyway, I saw his name in the book while I was reading through, the history behind some of the math problems and whatnot. And then it was there that I came across his name and I thought, what the hell is this guy? What's his deal? Turns out Clausewitz was like a Prussian general in the early 1800s. He wrote a book of war. Ironically, didn't become famous up until after he died. It's classic, look, I got it here courtesy of Amazon, actually, think of it. His work is now considered quite foundational in military theory and political science, and apparently math adjacent for philosophy. Clausewitz had a decorated military career, and then he drifted into the brutal fog that is politics. And from that chaotic mess, he tried to understand what war really was. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Huh? Not just how it looked on the battlefield, but what it meant beneath the surface. He argued that war wasn't just violence, it was politics, emotions, unpredictability playing out through military means. He gave us this big idea, war being a continuation of politics by any other means, which sounds poetic, but is also pretty terrifying. Clausewitz dissected war like a psychoanalyst. He pulled it apart into pieces, political intentions, emotional volatility, and the sheer randomness of what actually happens on the ground. I couldn't help but live by it. Courtesy of But here's what leads back to this whole channel. This isn't just about military philosophy, it's systems thinking, it's modeling chaos, it's recognizing that you never really deal with a perfect set of circumstances. And his obsession with the friction and fog of war, that's just an early form of like probabilistic modeling. So if you're a mathematician, those are terms that you might be familiar with. It's really all about strategy. When the inputs are dirty and the outputs are uncertain, and that, my friends, is the same thing we try to do with algebra, statistics, and probability. So I went down this rabbit hole thinking, maybe there's a neat answer to what Clausewitz was all about. Nope. Nada. Zip. Absolutely nothing. That's what war is good for. Absolutely nothing. But that's kind of the point, though. He's not really giving you answers. He's there giving you a framework to ask questions. And maybe that's his real contribution, because in the same way we fall for survivorship bias or mistake visibility for the full picture, we do the same thing with conflict, politics, even ourselves, and not to mention economics, something that's very more important these days. So, what's Clausewitz's problem? Maybe nothing, maybe everything, or maybe he just saw the world as a chaotic mess of forces, assumptions, and unseen pressures, and wanted to give us a map, even if it's written in fog. And hey, it is a math channel, so, no conspiracies here. Right? Yeah?